Okay, welcome. So, welcome to the virtual library visit. This meeting is recorded, so we're recording right now. So I just want to let you know, if you don't want to be on camera as part of this recording, you can turn off your camera. And the same goes for audio. If you don't want to hear yourself on the recording later, you can just ask your questions in the chat. Because we look forward to sharing this recording with you and other people who were not able to make it today. I think we should start, and if more people join us, I'll just jump right in, right? Okay, so my name is Alina Zosan, and I'm a librarian here in the art department at the Free Library of Philadelphia. I'm going to share my information in the chat here, so that's how you can get in touch with me. And there's a quick URL to get to the web page for the art department, so you can see other events that we have coming up and information about our collections. We are the largest collection of books and other materials on art in Philadelphia's public library system. We're located in Parkway Central Library, right next door to the print and picture collection. And pretty much once a year for the past few years, once or twice a year, we've done a lecture called The Art of Something. So I'm really excited that this year, Laura Straffolino, the curator of print and picture collection, is doing a talk called The Art of Augustus Kollner. So I'm just going to let her take it from here. And here's Laura.
Thanks, Alina. Let me start sharing my screen. All right. Thank you to Alina and the art department for hosting this event. I'm the curator of the Print and Picture Collection, which is home to a variety of graphic materials, including fine art prints, photographs, drawings, and artist books. Our Philadelphiana collection contains over 20,000 images of Philadelphia, both historical and modern. PIX also includes photographs and ephemera from the 1876 Centennial Exhibition in Philadelphia's Fairmount Park. And you can find more information about PIX and our contact info at freelibrary.org/PIX. And thanks to all of you for joining us for this survey of the art of Augustus Kollner. He was a German-born artist who settled in Philadelphia in 1840. This presentation will include a biographical look at Kollner's life and highlights from a large body of Kollner's work found at the Free Library of Philadelphia. Augustus Kollner was born around 1813 in Württemberg, Germany. By the age of 16, he was working as a professional engraver in Stuttgart, but he left Germany to work for a lithographic printer in Paris. In 1839, he immigrated to the United States and found work with a lithographer in Washington, D.C. In 1840, the year of this self-portrait, Kollner left D.C. to travel the American countryside, and by September, he had settled in Philadelphia. The biographical information I have comes from Augustus Kollner Artist, a 25-page article by Nicholas B. Wainwright in the July 1960 Pennsylvania Magazine of History and Biography. You can find that easily online, or we can share a link to it later. The personal details in the article were told to Wainwright by Kollner's great-grandson. Right, so you've got people. By Kollner's great-grandson, Edward Mears. In September 1840, Kollner established a portrait studio at the corner of Chestnut and Exchange Streets in Philadelphia, advertising that he painted portraits of military persons and ladies and gentlemen on horseback. His portrait studio venture was unsuccessful, but through a connection with P.S. Duval, who ran Philadelphia's major lithographic business, Kollner was hired as chief artist of the U.S. Military Magazine. Published by Duvall and partner William M. Huddy, U.S. Military Magazine was a monthly periodical that featured hand-colored lithographs of military persons. For a year and a half, Kollner drew military figures, many on horseback, such as this watercolor of U.S. Army General Winfield Scott, commanding general of the United States Army from 1841 to 1861. Kollner's first 7 years in Philadelphia were spent as an independent artist for hire and working for many printers, including P.S. Duvall and J.T. Bowen. In 1847, John Henry Camp and Louis Brecheman encouraged Kollner to join them as a designer, engraver, and lithographer for the firm of Brecheman and Camp in the Phoenix Block building on the southwest corner of 2nd and Dock Streets. Brecheman soon retired, and Kollner and Camp continued their association until 1851. Between 1848 and 1851, the publishing house of Goupil, Vibert and Company, I probably butchered that, of New York and Paris, published a series of 54 views of American and Canadian cities, drawn and colored by Kollner, lithographed by Laurent de Roy, and printed by F.L. Cattier in Paris. These views are considered his most ambitious and successful artistic achievement. Kollner often did work for the American Sunday School Union, which had an active publication program, publishing small, cheap, illustrated books each week. In 1850, Kollner created a larger volume of 12 lithographs called Common Sights in Town and Country, delineated and described for young children. The common sights in this volume include an oysterman selling his wares on a city street and a group of workers taking a break. Each image was accompanied by a page of large print text describing the scene and imparting a moral lesson. Some of Kollner's other work for the American Sunday School Union can be found in the Free Library's Rare Book Department, which has a collection of over 20,000 volumes published by the American Sunday School Union. In 1863, after Confederate troops invaded Pennsylvania, the 50-year-old Kollner enrolled as a private in the Dana Troop, a 90-day emergency Pennsylvania militia. Kollner sketched military scenes during his service and offered reproductions for sale. Kollner lost business throughout the 1850s because he failed to adopt steam-powered presses or chromolithography. In 1861, he gave up his offices in the Phoenix Block. Augustus Kollner had married Mary Sheik in 1843. Mary was the daughter of well-to-do German immigrants. In 1855, Augustus, Mary, and their children moved to 616 North 7th Street, a house owned by Mary's parents. In the 1860s, Mary inherited the house and a large income, and the Kollners were financially independent, allowing Augustus to spend the rest of his life creating art without struggling to sell it. We don't have an image of the Kollner's house, but the watercolor on the right is a scene at the corner of 6th and Buttonwood Street, just a few blocks away. When Kollner died on December 10th, 1906, he left behind a personal collection of his own work, a comprehensive catalog of nearly everything he had ever done. His unmarried daughter, Josephine, was given the task of clearing out the house before moving in with her sister's family, and she accepted a junk man's offer of only $2 for everything. Luckily, many of Kollner's works were preserved by print dealers and collectors. One of the largest groups of drawings was purchased by collector Joseph M. Fox. In 1946, his son, William Logan Fox, gave this group of 94 watercolors and drawings to the Free Library of Philadelphia. And the Print and Picture Collection's Kollner Collection now has 242 watercolors and drawings and 116 lithographs and etchings. All 358 of these works have been scanned, conserved, and neatly rehoused by size by the library's collection care department. And you can find all of these images in our digital collection at freelibrary.org/digital. Next, we're going to look a little closer at a sampling of the hundreds of watercolors found in our collection. But first, a few quotes about Kollner's work from the article by Nicholas B. Wainwright. Few artists worked as hard as he did. Every morning he left his house at daybreak and did not return from his studio until dusk. Throughout his life, Kollner had been a tireless sketcher, weather permitting. Virtually every summer, Kollner made long trips to sketch the American countryside. And when not engaged at his studio, he roamed the wharves and streets of Philadelphia, making hasty sketches which could later be put into more finished form. After his retirement from business, Kollner spent much time painting watercolors based on sketches he had drawn years before. So it's really hard to just pick a few, but I had to include this watercolor scene of the Fairmount Waterworks in 1843. Even though the Philadelphia Museum of Art has not yet been built, the scene is still recognizable. It's hard to tell if this is a large or small watercolor from this virtual slideshow. So I'll just tell you, it's a larger watercolor. It's about 14 inches by 11 inches, which is generally about the size of his larger watercolors. Mill Creek was buried in the late 19th century, and this 1877 view of the confluence of Mill Creek and the Schuylkill River just south of the Woodland Cemetery can no longer be seen. This 1879 watercolor shows the Hamilton Mansion on the grounds of the Woodland Cemetery and a few other houses that I don't know what they are. Located near present-day North 6th and Montgomery Avenue, this idyllic scene by Kollner may be misleading. When the Coxon Creek was buried in an underground sewer around 1860, a report from the Board of Health said that the entire length of its serpentine bed had become the receptacle of vile refuse and dead animals. You cannot smell this watercolor. And this small watercolor is one of my favorites. This technique is called grisaille, which is defined as decoration in tones of a single color, especially gray, designed to produce a three-dimensional effect. Kollner sketched this scene of Harper's Ferry in 1843, years before John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry in 1859. He didn't finish this large watercolor until 46 years later in 1889, 24 years after the end of the Civil War. For the next two images, I'm going to read another quote from the Wainwright article. There is nothing formal about Kollner's work. He admired the disordered aspects of nature, tumbling rocks, tangled trees, rushing rivers, and he sought to capture their moods. His work is uneven. While many of his pictures are delicately drawn and colored, there are also many which feature muddy colors and unconvincing bulging rocks. His concentration on painting odd-looking boulders, sunless glades, and cows standing under trees produced a large volume of work of little inherent interest. But in the course of drawing such scenes, he occasionally brought forth a gem. This small pen and wash drawing is another favorite. This is an example of pareidolia, the human ability to see shapes or make pictures out of randomness, also known as faces and things. The Sparks Shot Tower at Front and Carpenter was built in 1808 and is now part of a recreation center. This small watercolor shows the New York connecting railway of the Pennsylvania Railroad shortly after it was built in 1866 to 1867. Just a few years later, in 1871, the large bulging rock was bored for the Promontory Rock Tunnel. People drive through it every day on Kelly Drive. And I think this is just a lovely small watercolor. It's of South Laurel Hill Cemetery in 1862. In the 19th century, there were 5 covered bridges over the Wissahickon Creek. Today, there is only 1 covered bridge in all of Philadelphia, the Thomas Mill Bridge. And I'm not sure if this is the Thomas Mill Bridge or one of the other 4 19th century bridges. When I did some research, I found that there was an old red bridge, which was replaced by the Bluestone Bridge in 1897. So if anyone knows or recognizes the buildings behind, please feel free to comment in the chat or when we're done with our presentation. This is another delicate gem, this time of a Wissahickon scene in 1864. We'll finish this section with some autumn colors in the Wissahickon. There are 2 rowboats on the creek, and you might think that Kollner was embellishing since people don't boat on the Wissahickon now, but you can see images of people boating on the Wissahickon in the late 1800s in our digital collections. And another quote from Nicholas Wainwright. Its lasting value, however, does not depend on its worth as art, but on its merit as documentation of the 19th century American scene. Excuse me. And I see it both ways. I really love his gems. Pardon me. I really love his gems, but I do think that most people who are interested in Kollner and his work, they're looking for identifiable scenes. So in 2015, I asked our Facebook followers for help identifying a house in Kollner's 1884 watercolor at Germantown, Philadelphia. Within moments, the house was identified excuse me, as 4811 Germantown Avenue. And we did some other comparisons, including the Fairmount Waterworks in 1843 and 2015, Tower Street at Cotton in Manayunk in 1896 and 2015, and a Wissahickon scene in 1888 and 2015. In 2020, over 240 Kollner watercolors from our collection joined a free database called Watercolor World, featuring pre-1900 documentary watercolors from private and public collections around the world. While mapping the images, Watercolor World wondered where Lombard Street intersects with Penn Street. Our map collection has digitized an 1862 atlas of Philadelphia, which shows Penn Street intersecting with Lombard Street near the Delaware River. It turns out that Penn Street no longer exists in this area. It is now under I-95. And the print and picture collection has even more work by Augustus Kollner. In the Kollner Collection, which is a collection of 47 scrapbooks, prints, photos, news clippings, ephemera, and yes, even original watercolors. We have watercolors by Kollner, and you can see that they are glued right on the page, even if they don't fit. That is that watercolor folded on the left and unfolded and preserved with digitization on the right. And this is another scene. It's the Olympic baseball grounds in 1865. It was an early baseball field near 27th and Master. Mystery scrapbook. One day in 2018, I came across a mystery scrapbook on the shelves of the print and picture collection. I opened it to find 45 drawings of animals by Kollner, mostly from Four Paws Menagerie, which I first misread as Four Spangler's Menagerie. But when you Google it, you can find that it's Four Paws. And I found out that Four Paws Menagerie was part of the Philadelphia Circus at 10th and Callow Hill. And this is a photo that we have in our Kollner collection. So we have a bit of a conservation nightmare here. The scrapbook paper is acidic. The drawings are on both sides. And then they are glued and sometimes taped into the scrapbook. Here's some more They're really nicely watercolored studies. You can see, I don't think you, I can't do, I'm not doing a pointer, but where the tail of the llama would be, you can see that it's floating above him. And also over near the camels' heads, you could see faintly sketched human heads. And it looks like Kollner used these drawings as studies for prints. The grizzly bear looks pretty similar, although his expression in the lithograph isn't as sheepish as it is in the watercolor. I love his little eye in the watercolor. There's even more work by Kollner in other areas of Parkway Central Library. In addition to the American Sunday School Union books by Kollner, the Rare Book Department has a book of watercolor drawings and some material in their Pennsylvania German tractor collection. And then I found this map from our map collection in our digital collections. Kollner lithographed it in 1848. And our art department has a few Kollner works as well. This 2-volume set of original watercolors was donated in 1945 by Mrs. Frederick K. Mears, the wife of Augustus's grandson. We think the views of remarkable rocks, castles, and ruins of Württemberg, Germany were drawn before he immigrated to the United States, but completed much later. For example, this drawing has 2 dates. It has a date on the lower left, that's 1892, and a date on the lower right, that's 1838. So that's just 1 year before he came to the United States. By 1892, I think he was in Philadelphia. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen now. Stop share. And we're gonna send it back to Alina. She's gonna show you some more of that volume and some other Kollner holdings in the art department.
Thanks, Laura. I won't take too long because I really want to get to the discussion portion. I can see some very useful, knowledgeable comments already coming in. But I'll start with, I have a cradle here and I'll try to safely prop up the volume of views from Germany that Laura just mentioned. Just to give you a sense of the physicality of the thing. So these are actually, this is the one Kollner set of works that is not available in our digital library. Is that right, Laura? This is, I think this is not digitized, right?
No, there's quite a bit. The animals aren't digitized. Some other things in the rare book department are not digitized, and that is not digitized.
I see.
So what's digitized in the Kollner collection are the things that we specifically say are the Kollner collection, and then a few extra things that were in Kastner.
Okay, thank you. That's it's good to know. So this is something that you can visit the art department in person and see. So I just want to give you a sense of what that looks like. These are those views. There's this neat flap here. Turn this up, and you get a key to the views, the paintings, their locations. This is what they look like. They're watercolors, and as Laura mentioned, some of them have 2 different dates. One for when he perhaps made his initial sketches, and another for when he most likely completed the watercolor. And those dates are, they tend to be something like early 1800s, and then the later date is something like 1880 pretty often. So we're thinking perhaps, here's an example, 1880 for initial date, which, and then 1838 for an initial date, and then 1880 for a final date. So perhaps in his retirement, he was revisiting his sketches and completing some of these. Pure speculation. But anyway, this is just one of 2 volumes that you can see here in person. And we are, at this time, having, we have researchers come in for in-person appointments for 1 person at a time. So you can actually come see these tomorrow if you contact us in advance and make a request an appointment. This is a volume called Bits of Nature and Some Art Prospects in Fairmount Park, Philadelphia. Reading this upside down. But it's a set of views, lithographs. So they're lithographic prints by Kollner, and as the title suggests, they're all related to Fairmount Park. Some of them are from are views of related dwellings, properties, mansions. You can see bridges, rock formations are very popular, natural formations, falls. Some of these are from the Wissahickon, which was referred to as Fairmount Park in the beginning too. And correct me if I'm wrong, I think this is a Rob question, but that's why you'll see Wissahickon as part of this Fairmount set. So these are all digitized. These are you can see in the digital library. So that's freelibrary.org/digital. So yeah, these somebody was talking about the then and now photos that are so great and fun that Laura shared, and I would love to see these as then and now recreation. So hunting down these individual rocks would be pretty fun. So that's really all I had to share, just to give you a sense of what that looks like in the library. And yeah, let's take some questions. Let's hear some impressions. And I can read any questions that people are chatting, or if anyone wants to unmute themselves and make some comments, that would be great.
I see Adams says that the view of Mill Creek and the Schuylkill River is probably in Gladwin and not at Woodlands, which that would make sense.
I've been using the collection since before, for the past 30 years, literally, and digitized a lot of it by photographing them before the print and picture collection stopped allowing researchers to come in and do that. And I have a number of things on my own website that I have to look for, but I love the Kollners. The Kollners, they're just so sort of they're sort of like the Kennedy collection at the Historical Society. They're just almost amateurish in the way that they depict things, but I love the views and I've used a lot of them over the years in my own lectures.
And I will say that we do still allow researchers to come in. You don't have to take pictures of them if they're already digitized now. So that's one good thing, but we do still have, by appointment, although not quite yet. Maybe in the next few months, we'll be allowing people to come back in. I see Bill just looks eager about that. But we definitely allow people, because there's so much in the collection that hasn't been scanned, and people are allowed to come in and see. We prefer appointments, especially in this time, because when I say we, it's really, there's just one curator, and that's me. So appointments always work better. Let's see what else there is in the comment.
Oh yeah, no, go ahead.
Well, I had a comment and a question. So I was, while you were talking, I just checked the Art Museum collection. They have 16 Kollner pieces. I didn't have a chance to look at them closely, but I saw there were some animals and also some topographic views. So there's more things to look at. And I was really puzzled by that view of the woodlands at Gray's Ferry. I cannot get my brain to figure out where that is on the actual map of the world. But I don't know if you can shed any light on that.
I could probably shed some light on that. It's looking actually, I think, across what would have been the valley of Mill Creek, or maybe even, because that part of Mill Creek wasn't put in the sewer until the 1890s. So it's, I think, in that depression, we're looking from basically the below the woodlands, downstream of the woodlands. If you can picture that, over the valley of Mill Creek, the woodlands was up on a hill. So so that's the best. I've looked at that one for years, and I wish it showed a stream in it, but I think there is a stream in there down below that bluff. If you go to the University of the Sciences today, what used to be the pharmacy school, and go down into their newer campus, they actually carved out a parking lot out of the bluff. And I think they're standing on the bluff sort of across from the woodlands. There were houses down in that area too, back then, along the bottom of 43rd Street below Woodland Avenue. So I think that's what we're looking at. I think probably if I compared this one to and maybe if someone wants me to do that, I can do that. I have some pictures of a house that was right there. Does this have a year? 1879. So it probably is the Matzinger house there. There were houses there that actually were written about much later as they were torn down, because they were some of the old Revolutionary era houses. And I'll stop talking now. I don't want to. I could give my own.
Thank you.
Can we see that picture of the rock at Pencoid Manioc again?
A face?
Yeah. Does anybody have any ideas about that?
You mean its location?
Yeah.
Well, it says now Pencoid, and Pencoid, I don't know exactly where it is, but the Pencoid Bridge is that bridge that goes to Bala Cynwyd.
Did he put in now Pencoid?
Yeah, it is written on the paper, not on the drawing. Most of these things they're mostly mounted on paper. So I'm not 100% sure if he wrote it or not. In the article by Wainwright, he attributes it to Kollner saying it, like wistfully saying, now it's something else.
Well, that would be where the Pencoid Iron Works, which were on both sides of the river, where the Pencoid Bridge is, essentially where the SEPTA, WTC, the movie theater, the liquor store, that whole parking lot in there, all of that was on both sides. And I'm just interested. I obviously, it looks like a man's head, but I was just kind of interested if there was any more information about it, because it does look like a distinctive rock, and I like distinctive rocks. So
yeah, I like it a lot too. I didn't try to find out where it was.
Yeah,
but
there's a whole rock face on the other side of Ridge, and that's below Manioc. And that's a whole rock face that's, looking towards the river, towards the creek, and towards where the Pencoid Iron Works would have been. And that's near around where like Deke's Barbecue is right now, near the Wissahickon. So I just was curious if there was any more information about it. Obviously, Ridge would be sort of, he would have probably shown Ridge, but maybe not. This is sort of taking liberties here. So it's interesting. A great talk too, by the way.
It could be on the other side of the river, too.
Yeah, it could be, but it looks like he's looking towards a valley. So I would think it would be on the. Could be. But Pencoid would have been either side to people in 1864.
And I bet the nose of this guy's face is broken off over the years, but. Yeah.
Is it possible that this is Kollner's one artistic license, to belie Nicholas Wainwright's assessment of his work only having documentary value, and he just invented this rock?
Oh, no.
I like that you mentioned pareidolia, Laura. What a great word, isn't it?
I think. Am I muted, or can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, good. My button went away while I was sharing the screen.
We also have more comments from Joel Fry about the Woodlands image. Joel, do you want me to read that?
Yeah, you can read it, or I can talk about it. You can read what I wrote if I spelled it right.
Oh, I'll just let you take it from here if you don't mind speaking.
Okay, if you could go back to that image. But anyway, that house that's sitting at Mill Creek is probably the Jones family house. Nathan Jones owned the mills around 1800 at the mouth of the creek, and he married one of the Bartram granddaughters, Mary Bartram, probably the late 1790s. Yeah, so that house, it was famous. It's recorded as having now I'm trying to, now I can't remember, a southern plant, a crepe myrtle in front of it. And that tree could be a crepe myrtle that's standing there. But I think the creek is still there, but it's running under a culvert under the embankment of the railroad. At some point in 1850 or later, they connect the Philadelphia, Wilmington, and Baltimore Railroad at Gray's Ferry up to 30th Street, where the Pennsylvania Railroad goes west, or whatever it's called at that point. And that railroad is the same embankment that Amtrak and other lines run on now. So even before they sewerized Mill Creek, they built a giant embankment over the mouth to get the railroad tracks up there. And they also probably excavated an awful lot of soil. So I think what you're looking at is excavated spoils. The mills might already have been torn down. And it's hard to say when this was dated to. I don't know. Adam, do you know when they started the sewerization?
It started in 1869, but they didn't get to below Woodland Avenue until the 1890s. So
Yeah, so Kollner may or may not have been alive, but you know, his dates are always suspicious in my mind. Actually, I'll say one thing. The funny thing I find about his drawings and lithographs is they use the same title font, which looks so modern. It looks like a 20th century Gothic font. So he was, and I love that Wainwright snobby view. I mean, Wainwright was a typical Philadelphia upper class snob. So he didn't like Kollner probably because he was a German immigrant and whatever else. But that's a very modernistic labeling font that Kollner uses all the time.
Mhm.
no, I think you're right, Joel, that the railroad embankment is why we don't see the creek. I never thought of that. But
Yeah, we have some other photographs of this area, which I don't remember where I got from, but I spent quite a lot of time with Aaron Wunsch and other people talking about this image, and it's confusing. And he also may have compressed the perspective, so the Jones house is closer in appearance to the Woodlands, but I'm not sure about that. But the University of Sciences is there now. It's roughly 43rd and Woodland. And that house shows up on lots of maps, atlas maps, et cetera, property maps.
That's great information. I saw another comment where someone asked if his work was at Papha recently, and it was. There were the exhibition. What was that exhibition called? It was like the precursor to the Hudson River School, I think, and they were talking about Philadelphia and Pennsylvania artists, and there definitely was Kollner in that exhibition.
I just like to follow up on Ken's comment about the baseball field. The PHMC did put a marker there, I believe about 2 years ago on the edge of the field. That's now a rec center. And then I'd also like to just look at that Thomas Mill, well, maybe Thomas Mill image again, if you could put that up. Because
Sure.
I think those mill buildings, the dam is right above the bridge, and the mill buildings were located on that side. If you're looking from the Forbidden Drive side, that looks like exactly where the Thomas Mill Bridge would have been, and the Thomas Mill was on that side, not on the Forbidden Drive side. It was on the other side, on what some people refer to as the Chestnut Hill side. So I think that's probably the Thomas Mill Bridge. I could be wrong, but I don't think it would be the same. That doesn't make sense. The Bluestone Bridge, those buildings would have been right at the curvature. That's right near the big curvature, the last big curvature of the creek before it flows into the Schuylkill. And I don't think there's mill buildings. That would have been really close to Rittenhouse Town. I don't think that's just my sense is I don't think that's where that is. I think it's either Thomas Mill or it's somewhere else. I don't think it's where the Bluestone. Maybe someone else knows better than I do. That's just my sense. Because of where the mill race is, that coming in there, the dam's right above. That's kind of what I was thinking. And it looks like it.
Well, my only comment is that if the mill was really that big, and there were dozens, 40, the number I've heard is 48 mills along the Wissahickon. And maybe that's not all at the same time, but there were dozens of them, Rob, maybe you know better, and that they were all demolished over when the city took over that land for the park. It's just amazing the amount of.
Well, yeah, the ordinance would have gone, the legislation, go ahead, I'm sorry.
What happened to all the rubble? That's what I want.
Well, the legislation was a couple years after this to establish, this is a couple years before the park was formed.
Yeah.
So these mills would have been operational, and they remained operational while the city was acquiring them. It just, you know, the legislation didn't pass, and then the mills just disappeared. It took several decades for litigation and other, you know, things to happen. The city never has moved fast. Still doesn't.
It's just remarkable though that now there's hardly a trace of these places.
Yeah, that's a picnic grove now, if that's where that is. So this is great. This is wonderful.
I'm moving forward to the baseball image, since there's discussion about it. So this was the Olympic baseball ground, and from, I don't know if it was on the Parks and Rec site or Wikipedia or some other article that talked about it, and it said that like it's not exact, it's like in that same area as the one that the A's played at, but they had some different fields. So it is still used as a rec center, but like the Olympic baseball ground was before the one that became Jefferson Street Grounds or something like that. But I haven't done any other research into it and tried to find any other images. I was also like, I had, you know, was just looking at what Kollner we had in Kastner, and this one, you wouldn't be able to find this online because our Kollner has been scanned. So if I sent you the link, you could see it, but I mean, our Kastner has been scanned, but we haven't had the manpower to actually make records that you can find them. So the reason I can find it is because we have the card catalog, and it says Kollner did this watercolor. Someday you'll be able to fully find these things.
If this is where the rec center is now, there between the rec center and the baseball field, there was a reservoir on the site until, I'm not sure, until probably in 1909 when the Spring Garden Waterworks was abandoned, and then they abandoned the reservoir. That this would have been a reservoir for. So there've been a number of different uses of this piece of park or recreation ground.
Oh, I see another comment. Someone asked if Papha borrowed Kollner Work. No, I mean, he was so prolific. If you Google, you can find things for auction. You'll find things everywhere. We do have some of his work from throughout the, you know, we have like Niagara Falls and Harper's Ferry. Most of our stuff is Philadelphia and Pennsylvania, but you can find watercolors and prints of the DC area. He just, I don't know, you know, how much he made in his life. You know, he just didn't stop. And then I also see, I saw another thing, about Cohoxing Creek. No, I think there's just, if you look up Cohoxing, I think that's really the Bader's glue factory is maybe the only one with the with buildings in it, and then that one I like so much. This one, it says it's Germantown and the Cohoxing Creek in 1842, but I don't know. I mean, I guess you could look at maps and try and figure out where that is, or Adam might be able to tell us. But there's a railroad bridge and a creek and a cow.
I just like them. They're about 5, I think. You know, maybe there's some of Gunner's Run also, but there are several of the Cohoxing. I don't think you showed all of them. There's maybe you did. There's one that has a long view with buildings in the background. I don't did you, and I don't know if that's what Ken is asking about, the village that was named Cahoxing. But
I was just wondering about the other images of Cahoxing, because it was a fairly active village early on, kind of to support the mansion of Fairhill, which was a couple of blocks away to the north, and it became a real center of industry before all of that area became industrial, and so that glue factory is a real nice example of that.
Yeah. You know, I'm looking at this watercolor. I can probably see it closer than you guys, but it actually says Germantown Railroad. So maybe it wasn't labeled as Germantown, but if there was a railroad called the Germantown Railroad.
yeah, this wouldn't have been in Germantown. This is
Right.
And it's where Cahoxing is where Germantown Avenue or road cuts across. So it might be part of that too.
Yeah. Oh, and Ken, and you can just search the free library, freelibrary.org/digital for Cahoxing.
Oh, great.
And whatever other Kollners we have should show up.
I have a question since we were talking about sewerization and high embankments already, but I was wondering about this Kollner print in the digital library, which was actually not part of the slideshow, but it features some tall embankment-like structures. Is this related to that? Should I share my screen? Sorry.
Oh no, I'll do it. I was doing it. Oh well, does this look like the 27th and Aspen view?
Yeah, that's it.
What is it?
There's a copy of that at the library company, and it's 27th and Aspen, which is just north of Spring Garden, I guess, approximately across from the art museum, a little bit to the north of the art museum. But of course, the art museum wasn't there. Oh, I've never seen that. That's great.
Just north of Fairmount Waterworks, it says. With our digital collections, you can do things. I mean, this might be too much, but you can really zoom in, which is nice.
Ken, do you know where that is?
Yeah, I nailed it down for a blog post I wrote years ago. And I think if the maps from the 1850s, 60s kind of show that area, I can't remember how well I nailed it down, but I was comfortable saying 27th and Aspen. And I think the library company caption, it says that or confirms that.
Alina, can you scroll back out so we can see it again? Sorry. I had to step away for a minute. Oh.
And
so this would have been.
And this is the one that Alina shared.
Yeah.
So Adam, that has to do with your waffle, right?
Well, possibly. It also just could be, yeah, probably. Probably, except there's still some, there's still some hills. You go uphill to get from Pennsylvania Avenue up to 25th and Aspen. Then, so there's sort of a hill between Pennsylvania Avenue and Girard Avenue as you go down. Girard College is sort of up on a hill. So this is, I think, part of that hill. But you're right, they're probably cutting streets through this. And this house maybe is going to be taken down eventually as they level this piece of this.
Is that the standpipe in the background?
I can't see.
What is that? Can you zoom in at all? What is that?
Yeah, let me see.
Is that the standpipe on the right? No, that's a church.
No, it's a church.
Church. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, well, of course, all these odd wood, especially these wooden houses, are all, as neighborhoods grew up over these weird areas, they were all taken
That's
down.
really.
That looks very primitive, very old.
Yeah. It looks like it was built onto several times.
Yeah, it started out as a shack and then they built a few more shacks on it.
Yeah, this is, I disagree with Wainwright. I gotta say, I think he has talent.
I'm sending, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm done.
I found the blog post I wrote in 2014. I'll send a link to everyone. And
You know, I actually just shared it in the chat. Sorry, I went looking for it.
Great, thank you. I honestly don't remember exactly what I wrote at this point 7 years ago, but I must have felt confident at the time.
Oh, it's super interesting. I look forward to reading it. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was going to just say quickly, I've seen a couple similar Kollner views of West Philadelphia, like Blockley Township, where they're cutting the roads, and they are still, it's along the valley of Mill Creek. And there are some big mills at isolated places. There are a few rows of houses built like out in the middle of nowhere. There's like a red row that's famous in Kings Essing, but there are often these terrain changes where when the roads are cut, they're getting down like 20, 30 feet to level the streets. So I guess they're after 1854 when they're beginning to run the streets through, mostly Blockley, I think they were, but where it intersects the Mill Creek Valley, there's all this terrain that was changed dramatically.
Yeah, Joel, I think you're thinking of Kennedy drawings, but
Oh, maybe they're Kennedy, but some of them are Kollner, I think, too.
also could be they could be Frank Taylor drawings too.
Yeah, there are those. Some of them, they all drew the same things. Maybe they knew each other. That would be something to look into. Did Kollner know Kennedy or Frank Taylor?
And then there was Eckfelt, the photographer, who often photographed the same things that especially Taylor was drawing at the same time. So. There you go.
Well, I see it's almost 6 o'clock, so last call for questions. I hope we didn't overlook anyone from the chat. But there's lots of stuff to chew on here that has been shared. So
Thank you for putting this together.
yeah, thanks, Laura. This was great.
Yeah, thanks very much, everybody.
I have a question about the library opening. Any news? Or volunteers returning?
So right now, we're doing, we're open to the public just to pick up materials, as you know,
Right.
from the lobby, 12 to 4 p.m. every Monday through Friday. And then we do appointments in the research department. So social science and history, art and literature is very active. So if you'd like to request an appointment, the form is just at the top of freelibrary.org/art. But it is one researcher at a time, and you have the room to yourself for an hour or so. But there is talk of gradually expanding, likely this summer. So we're probably this summer we'll see browsing again, which is what everybody wants to do. But yeah, until then, we do a program that's like a virtual shelf browsing where I'll grab books off a shelf and hold them up to the camera. So if you'd like to join one of those, you can see them on our webpage as well. But yeah, Laura, did you share your contact information? So if anybody wants to get back to you with Kollner questions.
Yeah, I'll put it in the chat.
Okay, and we'll share a recording with registrants. So if anybody who signed up and missed the event, or if you'd like to view this or share it with somebody, we'll email you a recording of the talk. So thanks for coming, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Great presentation. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you.